What's up, everybody? I figure with this one, you're either really gonna like it or you're gonna get mad and unsub within the first couple minutes. But that's what it takes sometime to keep the comment section gene pool purged and the bloodline pure. That's a joke. Calm down, Justice Superhero. I've kind of shown the inner workings of how these online groupthink experiments go. But people take this one very personally because it's the holy grail of stolen history. And you know, if you've seen these videos and you think, well, there must be something to it, I can't blame you. If thousands of people are making hundreds of thousands of videos about the same thing, there's got to be something there, right? Well, I want to thank Myth Vision Podcast for introducing me to Bandolini's Law here. I know some of you guys saw that video yesterday. The amount of energy needed to refute BS is an order of magnitude bigger than needed to produce it. Truer words have never been spoken. So I'm not going to try to prove or disprove anything. I'm just going to tell you guys what I saw because I watched the whole thing from the beginning, and a lot of you guys did too. And there were two left field ideas that I couldn't believe became centerpieces of this topic. One is the incubators. Most people don't realize what a sad, depressing world pretty much all of humanity has grown up in up until 100 years ago, where most people lost 3 or 4 siblings by the time they were mature. That is devastational to the human psyche. And the other topic is the orphan trains. I've seen 1,000 videos out there on this subject, and I've never seen one person actually look into it and even attempt to study what was going on at that time period to bring that about. So let's do a brief history of the mud flood and Tartaria subjects. And I'm going to tell you how I watched all of this unfold from my perspective. I'm not doing this to be mean or burst anybody's bubble, but I think this is important to understand because I see the same procedures over and over with every online groupthink investigation. This is how I watch things unfold, and unfortunately I was throwing fuel on the fire as well because I was bringing actual historical events to this instead of just looking at photographs and helping to legitimize things. It's kind of hard to imagine now, but 6 years ago nobody really knew anything about these past catastrophes. Now I even see History Channel doing videos on it, which I knew they would. I knew they were going to follow what we were doing. But I knew a lot about history. I knew there were gaps in there that didn't make sense. And as soon as I threw in the catastrophic equation, then it made sense. It's the whole reason I started doing videos. I had seen a couple mud flood videos, and I knew about the 1812 Madrid quakes and all kinds of weird stuff that went on at that time. So I sent it to a couple of these creators, not going to get into how they twisted it, but now we had a legit reason for all of these buried cities and structures all around the world. So then all kinds of people started bringing different puzzle pieces to the table, like the Magdalene Day flood, which actually happened during the 14th century catastrophes that I've talked about, and then the 1666 Great Fire of London. And the attitude was, I've never heard of this, so this is hidden history. They've covered this up from us. I mean, come on, 1666? And with every new disaster that people learn about, we're entering a new timeline. And sorry, but no, this information was there for anybody who bothered to go look it up. And just because you learn something new, that doesn't change all of world history. But that's exactly what happened, and it didn't take a week, and all history is fake. And we've got the Magdalene Flood, 1342, the Great London Fire, 1666, the Great Chicago Fire, 1871, the New Madrid Quakes, 1812, the San Francisco Quake, 1906. So it's all the same event, and now all history is fake. Well, you do realize that you're using historical accounts to establish the fact that all history is fake, right? Of course not. And nobody ever fact-checked anything that anybody said. If you came online and said it and somebody liked it, then it was the truth. Somebody comes on and says there's no construction photos of the 1893 World's Fair, so it's an ancient leftover building from the Tartarians that nobody knows what happened to. Nobody knows what language they spoke. No fairy tales, no nothing. The very day that rumor started, I sent the person who started it these photos, which were promptly ignored. Then finally, a couple months later, somebody comes on and says, okay, well, these photos exist, but it's all Photoshop. Okay, so now we're playing that game. If there's a historical account of disasters happening, then that's true, but all other history is fake. If there's construction photos of the World's Fair being built, then those are fake, but we can't apply that the other way around and say, well, how do we know the finished product was real, because that could have been Photoshop too. And by the way, there was never any evidence to back up the Photoshop claim. It was just claimed, and therefore it's true. It was claimed that these are magnificent ancient stone monuments from a lost ancient civilization, and people came to this World's Fair from all around the world, and they couldn't realize that this was actually an ancient building and not brand new, because people were just that dumb 130 years ago. But when this stone monument burns down, well, now we're just not even going to talk about that. These buildings were just wood, steel, and stucco, and I'm sorry to anybody that's been fooled by this, but I'm not the one that ignored the shat ton of evidence that's out there and lied to everybody. This is the entrance to one of them being built. I can't remember if this is the 1893, but here's the finished product. And you see the big, huge angel wings that are molded into the arch itself? That's literally impossible out of stone, unless they brought in a 70-foot tall solid chunk and carved it right there in place. You're not transporting that. Not because of the size, because the wings would break off. And it's a little curious that every, quote, researcher missed all of this that was around the World's Fair. Ode to Spain, ode to Germany, ode to the ostriches. And even right now watching this video, people will ignore everything that I'm showing here and insist that those magnificent buildings were long-lost ancient architecture, because it's easier to fool somebody than convince them they've been fooled. And that's exactly what people are saying about me right now, but I'm not the one ignoring 90% of the evidence out there. Like all the writing on this, quote, stone facade being in English and having the name California right there at the top. But you know what I learned from all of this? Is people are going to believe whatever they want to believe, and then there's no amount of evidence you can show them to convince them otherwise. And look, I'm not saying that past catastrophes haven't happened. They 100% have. Half of the ancient world is buried. But it's what people have done with the evidence on hand that has created this online fantasy world. They've taken photos like this and said, see, there's a long-lost ancient city underneath of modern Paris. Well, it turns out there is an ancient Roman city underneath modern Paris. It's called Lutetia. And had anybody bothered to research this, they would have found that out. But no, they stuck with photographs. They took pictures like this and said, see, long-lost ancient city. Well, what were they trying to build here? Who builds that sloppily? Those columns aren't even the same height. The little openings you see, the quote-unquote windows, aren't the same height. And this just comes from people's lack of knowledge. This is literally done all the time. Any major city in America, I guarantee you there's 50 of these scattered around the city right now. This is just shoring. They are about to excavate one side or the other of these pylons. You drill holes down, you pour concrete, and then you can excavate one side of it without the other stuff falling in on top of you. Had anybody bothered to actually look into this, they would have found out that they were just digging out for the Paris subway here. And really, this all just goes to show that random facts from random people does not equal a greater truth. It just means people have isolated different examples and completely ignored the context of which they are sitting in, used it as evidence to form their bigger theory. So that was the mud flood aspect of things. Now let's talk about Tartaria. And I'll just tell you, as soon as one video, people said, oh, what's Tartaria? And it got hundreds of thousands of clicks, then everything became Tartaria. In a matter of days, it went from what is Tartaria to Tartarians built all of the ancient stone structures all around the world without the slightest bit of evidence or investigational integrity. Apparently, none of these YouTube historians had ever even heard of the Tartars or had the slightest inclination that that's how place names are Latinized. You put an IA on the end of it, and it basically means land of. You got Macedonia, Albania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania, which literally means land of the Romans, because that's where they moved to after the Western collapse, and they still consider themselves Romans to this day. So Tartaria just means land of the Tartars. Grand Tartaria just means it's a really big land. Grand simply means large. It has nothing to do with extravagant or luxurious. It's just large. So look, if you were to ask me right now, where can I go in the world and find nomadic tribes that have been living the exact same way for thousands of years? I would say the Eurasian steppe, Siberia, Tartaria. This is pretty much the only place on Earth that's so remote that no government has taken control of it, so people can still live this way. But it was really amazing to watch how, with no evidence whatsoever other than someone just saying this, the Tartarians from over in this section of the world became the master stone builders that were worldwide. Here's a map of all of the great cathedrals in Europe, thousands of miles away from Tartaria. But somehow the Tartarians managed to come over here, build everything, and disappear without a trace, without leaving any tools behind, and without anyone remembering it. Plus, no one has ever found any significant architecture in this part of the world. But then people just started saying, well, the whole world was Tartaria. And I still remember who it was that introduced the idea of Tartaria in North America. And it was because of an old map that, if I felt like spending an hour to find it, I could, that referenced the Tartarians coming over the Bering Strait land bridge. That's because when the map was made in the 1700s, they recognized the similarities between the Tartarians here and Native Americans. Had anyone put the slightest bit of effort into actually understanding this, they would look at the flag of Tartary and the flag of China and say, they both got dragons, they're both yellow, so they're probably closely related. And sure enough, the Tartars are Asiatic people, and quite feared by our ancestors. They call them the Tartars after Tartarus, the Greek equivalent of hell, because when these people came and raided you, it was like going to hell. People would find various mentions of Tartaria in books, like this fictional book from 1690, I think, and say, well, see, Tartary's real, so all this stuff online must be true. And sorry, but the whole foundation of this subject was built off of ignorance, which just means a lack of knowledge, and unfortunately through people who were willing to lie about this to get the clicks. And, you know, that was only a handful of people that were willing to lie or just omit contradictory evidence. But then the seed was planted, and then people truly believed this was what was going on because of what had been put out there. Like me, when I started, I thought people were actually interested in history and trying to find the truth. But after a couple of interactions with these people, I realized that's not the case. They're going to ignore anything that doesn't go along with this because it's getting a lot of clicks. This is nothing new. It's just like the Cardiff Giant in the 1800s. Everyone in America knew about these giant burial mounds all across the country, and they believed this must be the Nephilim, which we view with negative connotations, but what it says is the heroes of old, men of renown, or I'm paraphrasing. But you can see these people showing respect. They think that this is an actual petrified giant, and it was a hoax from a guy that wanted to pull one over on all the Bible thumpers. If people want to believe something, then there's always going to be somebody who will give them what they want to hear, especially if there's money involved. He took this on a road show, charged a dime a head for people to come in and see it. Now, YouTube is that on steroids and pays way more money. I was telling people at the height of this mania, unfortunately, I had already been shadowed, but I said, hey, if you want to make some money, start a channel, throw in some pictures of old buildings, say everything is fake, and put Tartaria in the title. You're guaranteed at least 10,000 clicks. Why do you need 20 train lines going into the World's Fair? Because it's a World's Fair and they're expecting hundreds of thousands of people a day. But, you know, to the Kool-Aid drinkers on this, there's no amount of evidence that will ever change their mind. They've spent years of their life investing in this. So fine, if that's what you want to believe it. But to the people that have stumbled across this and are genuinely looking for what the truth is, just fact check anything you hear these people say and see if it adds up. One is, how come none of these creators have ever mentioned the steam era? The entire Industrial Revolution was powered for 300 years by steam. Steam boats, steam trains, steam engines in warehouses. And our super advanced space age technology of today, nuclear, is steam power because it's that efficient and effective. It's hard to beat. Yeah, a nuclear reactor is nothing more than heating up water and generating steam to turn a turbine. But all these creators entirely ignore the Industrial Revolution. Let me ask you this. If everything collapsed right now, would we rebuild with steam? Would everybody just forget about electricity? No, I can make a generator right now. Give me a magnet and some copper wire. But that's the claim. We were a super advanced civilization. It collapsed, and then they ignore that steam ever existed, but it did. So you can ignore all the evidence you want. And if that's your methodology, it just means that you're not being honest about it. And that's why so many people get so upset about this subject, because they know deep down inside that it's crap. They keep referring to the 1893 World's Fair like we couldn't have built it at that time. That was 20 years before World War I and tanks and planes. So you think that we went from clacking rocks together to that? People can't seem to grasp the concept that the Mississippi River was a huge mile-wide obstacle separating the East Coast from the Midwest until structural steel was advanced enough to actually make a bridge across that river. It might as well have been two completely different continents. And that the East Coast was building up cities for 300 years before a bridge went over this river. So yes, construction on the Brooklyn Bridge started 7 years before Custer's last stand in the West. Just like today, if you go down to Rio de Janeiro, people are walking around on cell phones, while 20 miles away, people are using blowguns, living in grass huts. And, I could literally go on for days, but I'll just quit there. I'm sure I've lost plenty of subs already. I've watched quite a few of these groupthink experiments take place now, and it's always the same. They take the pieces that they want that fit into their narrative and ignore the mountain of evidence to the contrary. The simple truth is, the majority of people aren't that intelligent and definitely don't apply any diligence to what they're doing. Therefore, the most popular ideas are usually incorrect. I think I'll make that Static's law. I'll think about that for a minute, get it down to its most eloquent form, and get back to you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're still here at this point, then you probably already knew these things. Or if you were on the fence about these things and made it this far, congratulations. You're one of the few that are willing to actually look at the contrary evidence and make up your own mind. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.